Hi, everybody. Welcome to Barely Filtered. This episode is so much fun. This is a new friend, but basically I was a fangirl and I stalked her down on Instagram. You may know her as Maybe Both. That is her handle on Instagram. Her name is Anna Kai, and she is so much fun. She gives really inspirational, very articulate notes, voice notes, I guess, if you will, to women and men, just to women and men about dating and about how to be your best, most confident self in a relationship or when you're trying to find a relationship. So we had such a fun conversation today. She's kind of giving me some advice about how I could be doing better, I guess, in my dating life. Not doing better, but just giving me some advice on how to put my best foot forward. And I do have to tell you that I don't feel like my best foot has been forward in the last few weeks. I'm giving myself some grace, but I broke one of my rules, and it's kind of an embarrassing story. But I was doing this fundraiser for St. Jude, which is an amazing organization. These guys are solving childhood cancer. It's a research hospital. No families have to pay 1 cent. So they cover everything from travel to housing to all of the care that you and your family need and education. It's the best charity ever, and I'm so grateful to be associated with them. So I got to go and be part of something called Country Care. So a bunch of country artists were there, and there were other influencers and influencers and talent who went as well. Anyway, so I'm recording this introduction like a little bit in the future, and I haven't been drinking. I haven't drank for I don't know, maybe 2 weeks now. But at the time, let's just say we went out, me, a couple other people that I met there. We had some drinks. One thing led to another. And I ended up going back to a hotel room with one of the guys there. Single, super nice guy, really sweet. He is actually a creator too. And I broke my rule. That's all I'm going to say. And the next day, let me just tell you, there is no worse hell than being hungover and morally hungover at the airport. Like, seriously. And he drove us to the airport too. So, okay, so you wake up, you feel like complete shit. You look like a disaster. I looked at myself in the mirror. I'm like, who are you? I looked like a complete disaster. Of course, I was like just about to get my period too. So I was like breaking out. And if you hook up with somebody, then like your makeup comes off and then you can like see all your pimples underneath. And I'm just like, oh my God, did he see that? Probably. I also like was not planning on hooking up with anybody. So I was not like shaved or anything. I was just like, the next morning I woke up and I was like, oh no. No. This was not supposed to happen. That back in the day, that's like how you'd prevent yourself from having one night stand. You just like wouldn't shave. And you're like, well, now I'm definitely not hooking up. Turns out you just forget. I don't know. It's probably from being married for so many years. I'm like, I don't care anymore. But I heard like the bush is coming back in. So maybe I'm just on trend. I don't know. We had a great time. We have really not kept in touch, but I don't think either of us are ghosting each other. It's just like he lives in Nashville, I live in LA, and this wasn't supposed to be like the start of a beautiful relationship, but maybe, I don't know, if you're out there. And now we're just going to hop right into it. Oh my God. So you just launched your own podcast 4 days ago.
Yes.
That is amazing. And I can't believe, so you record here and in LA.
Yes, I record both at Melrose Podcast in New York and LA, and we launched 4 days ago. It's been really exciting. It's been horrifying because I've been filming this podcast for the better half of the last year. And it's sort of one of those things where I almost never thought I had to release it. Because when you put it out into the world, then you actually have to see what people...
So you banked up your episodes.
I banked about 20 episodes.
Oh my God, that's a lot.
It is a lot. And I think I did that because it was very comforting to continue recording.
Yeah.
And just bank all these episodes and just feel like, okay, I'll be prepared. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to wait until I felt prepared. And at the beginning of October, I signed with my network, Forward Network, and I was like, well, maybe, you know, it's there was always an excuse, right? Okay, I didn't want to launch in the summer because it's the summer, and then right around Labor Day, back to school was a little crazy, and I was traveling, and then I was like, it's election season and it's the holidays. So I was like, why don't we push to January? And they were like, no, you need to launch at the end of this month. And I was like, okay, I will do that.
Yeah, there's always like, I think a dip kind of in listenership too over the holidays. People are traveling and stuff like that. Oh my God, that's so funny. I've heard that from a lot of people who do podcasts that like they have no problem recording, but then they like get shy to launch it. Like, do you feel like you wanted to have a lot banked, or that because like you felt like you couldn't keep up with like releasing every week? Is it a weekly podcast?
It is a weekly podcast, and I wanted to have a lot of episodes banked in case something catastrophic happened in my life and I couldn't record for a month.
Yeah.
I think general rule of thumb, what I was told by my team was you should bank 6 to 8 episodes before you launch. And I think generally most people do that. But I didn't. I just kept recording and I never released them.
Oh my God. Are they mostly solo episodes?
No, they're all guest episodes.
Oh, cool.
So, and I will do some solos in the future, but the guest episodes, I was the most nervous about scheduling because obviously you're working with other people's schedules.
Right.
And so, and I was really pitching myself for guests when I didn't have a podcast yet. So it was sort of this massive experimentation. So I'm super honored that the people who were willing to talk to me before they knew what this podcast was were willing to talk to me, you included, because now I've launched. But when you said yes.
No, well, I mean, I feel like you kind of were making a podcast, whether you knew it or not, in those like 2-minute clips that you put on Instagram.
Right. I mean, my content lends itself to podcasting, but it's still a different format and it's so unscripted, whereas all my short form content is scripted. I write every single thing.
And do you memorize it?
Yeah, and I recite it. So there is nothing in there that's unrehearsed.
Yeah.
And I think about it beforehand, and so this is a very different format where it's very freeform.
Right.
And even though I've been a guest on podcasts before, it's very different hosting.
Yeah, that's for damn sure. Especially like hosting by yourself. I remember like because I started with a co-host and then she took a different turn and now lives in Nashville and is like on Fox News and I didn't want to take that avenue, so I'm now hosting by myself. And I remember just being like, okay, where do I look? Who am I talking to? Wait, hold on, I have to just talk to myself for like an hour, but then you get used to it.
Yeah, well, I think the solo episodes are even more difficult because you're just looking into a void talking about your life and hoping people will listen.
Totally. But they actually do. And the weird thing is that like my solo episodes actually perform better than my guest episodes.
Interesting.
I think it's because people know that like I'm just going to spill all the tea because that like it's all you can do really in an hour. It's like, what else is there? You just have to tell all your secrets and, rat out everybody else. And that's usually what ends up happening.
That's why people love it. Barely filtered. There we go.
Totally. Oh my God. Okay. So let's get into like what I feel like you are known for, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like people love to come to you mostly for like dating advice, right? Or dating tips. Like,
I think it's mostly dating and relationships and how to feel good after you've been dumped or you aren't getting what you want. And so it's dating in the sense of what is it in the greater context of your life.
Right, and like building confidence.
Exactly.
I feel like
empowerment. And I just think it's so hard to date as a woman.
Oh my God, I know, but I'm like, now that I've done my research on you, I'm like, wait a minute, she's happily married. This is bullshit.
I am, right, but I've been there. And I wish I had so many girlfriends who met their husbands in college and never had to do the online dating thing and never had to really go on a first date, because when you meet really young, you don't really go on first dates. You sort of just hang out with each other's friends. You remember that?
I never did. So I never did online dating until like this year.
Right.
Literally, it's like my first year, and at first it was really fun because I'm like, oh my God, it's like a catalog. You could just like pick whatever one you want, but
then you realize the catalog's kind of shit.
Yeah, and I'm like, I've been duped. He doesn't, and I'm like, is this Facetuned? Like the men that are like I love when men Facetune themselves because they don't know how and they don't know what they're doing, and it's just like, oh no, you used that way too, the like blur.
They use like 8 Paris filters on top of one another, and you're just like, you literally don't even exist anymore.
I'm like, is that Face App Hollywood 3 level 4? What the hell are you doing? Like, you think you're going to dupe me? I know those filters.
You're like, you can't kid a kidder. Come on.
Oh my God, it's so bad.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like I was personally so brutalized by the dating process in my 20s in New York because I was always looking. I was never not looking for a husband. As soon as I realized I was attracted to men in high school or college, I was always looking for my husband. I was never a casual dater. And I remember freshman year of college, I met this guy right at orientation, and he was great. And he told me about how his parents met the first week of college and they were happily married. And I was like, oh my God, we're following in their footsteps. Of course, he dumped me 3 weeks later.
3 weeks?
Yeah. And then we got back together, and then it was a thing. And then
I think probably for the entire 4 years of college.
No, for 3 months. And then it really was over. But I just always felt like I didn't know how to be cool when it came to dating, because I was never chill, and I was always looking for my husband. And so I just had to figure out what worked for me and what didn't in a culture at the time that prioritized being cool.
Yes, like
not
being
caring.
chill, not caring, like go with the flow. I can relate to that, because I'm also not a flow goer. And I think that was one of the things with my marriage where I was like, and before I got married, like dating him, particularly my ex-husband, of just being like, okay, I really want to be the cool girl, like the chill girl who like doesn't like, will just like, you can go out with your friends whenever you want. You can do like, you be you, and you don't need to change at all for me. Because I think the worst thing is to be a girl who tries to change the man. So you want to like let them be themselves as much as possible. But then also it's kind of hard to know, what if you just don't like how they are, though?
Right. And then it's like, I think the thing is, now that I'm happily married, I realize that it was not fair to myself to be chill with things I was not okay with. That there is a guy out there that will choose you over his friends, that will choose you and prioritize you at the end of the day. It's not just a given, but I was dating a lot of men that were just not fits. And maybe they would have prioritized another woman. Yeah. I always wonder this. All the Chads of my past, have they been better? And I'm sure a lot of them have. I'm sure a lot of them met women that made them want to commit. I was just not that woman. Doesn't make me any less of a person. It just means we were not right for each other.
Yeah. I think that's such a tough lesson to learn. And I think it just takes a lot of self-esteem, honestly, because I don't know why it hurts us so badly, but I remember like I feel like nothing cuts deeper than being dumped before you feel like the person actually got to know you. But when you feel like, if I only had like a couple more months with him, or like he didn't get to see me in this environment, he didn't get me to, because you feel like you didn't get your real shot.
Well, I think sometimes the shorter relationships hurt more when they end than the longer ones, because the longer ones, you've had an opportunity to see each other's shit and realize that you don't really like each other.
Right.
Whereas the shorter ones, you're fantasizing about this reality that doesn't exist. And so you're like, well, what if he just gave it a couple more months? Or what if he realized I could be chill? Or what if... And it's a lot of what ifs. And in the end, it probably wouldn't have worked out anyways, even if you gave it another year. But I always think about that. Like, I had a relationship where he broke up with me because I told him to stop using dip. Do you know what that is?
Yes. It's disgusting.
It's so gross. It's not even chewing tobacco. I realized it's very similar. It's just
it's like dirt they put in their lip and then spit into a bottle.
Yes, it's literally a ball of tobacco that you just put in your mouth and you let it sit there in your gum. And it really bothered me that my ex did this, and I didn't want him to do it in front of me. And for the most part, he wouldn't. But then he got drunk one night with his friends, and we were all out, and he did it. And I was like, I don't want you to do this. Mostly because if we're going to continue dating each other and possibly get married, I don't want you to die of oral cancer at 50 and leave me a widow.
Yeah.
Right?
I know. But also like that's not chill to say that.
I know. It's so not chill. And he broke up with me.
He broke up with you because of that?
He didn't say it was because of that, but I know that was the catalyst because he did not take that well. Yeah. He said, I just want to be able to do what I want to be able to do. It's my life. I don't tell you what to do. And we didn't break up that night, but then a couple days later, he asked me to come over to his apartment, and he was like, look, I just don't think I'm in a space right now to commit to anybody. He just really meant me.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And it didn't work out for the right reasons, because ultimately I didn't need to be with a man who had those habits. And he didn't need to be with a woman who felt the need to control what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
Maybe he's with somebody right now who's okay with that. Or
I mean, honestly, like, I probably would have been the girl that was like, yeah, that's cool. You're going to stop eventually, right? Like, my ex-husband smoked cigarettes.
Right.
And when I met him, I was like, I thought he was just like a casual smoker. And then I learned that he was one of those people who literally had a cigarette with coffee in the morning. And the thing was always like, okay, well, when we get married, I'll quit. When we have our first kid, I'll quit. And then it's like the timeline kept getting pushed back. It was never convenient. And then I always found myself like worrying so much about him, worrying that like, because I have 2 kids with him too. So I'm always like, you're going to like break my children's heart because you're going to die of cancer. Blah, blah. And then he literally says this to me, which I kind of think is true, honestly. He's like, the stress that you have about me getting sick is more toxic than like the cigarettes that I'm putting in my body. And sometimes I feel like that's actually true. Like, just the worrying about somebody so much is so bad for us, right?
Yeah, like, well, for you.
For me.
But I would say scientifically, he should stop smoking.
Well, I think like most people would agree with that. He's literally one of those people, though, who thinks it's not bad for him.
Oh.
And I actually kind of think if you truly believe something, like the cells in your body will respond. There's actually been a lot of studies on it. People who do not think something's bad for them have a greater chance of it actually not affecting them.
Interesting, but to what degree?
I know.
Like if you think heroin's not bad for
right.
you, to what degree, right?
Totally.
So, I mean, talk about Delulu.
I know. Yeah. So we're not married anymore, but that was one of the catalysts. And if I was being honest, which it sounds like you were really like you were ahead of me, at least during that time when I started being with him, because I was just like, I it's a me thing. Like I have to kind of get over it.
You wanted to change yourself because you couldn't change him.
Yes. And you know what? When we would go to couples therapy, it was the most frustrating thing because there was a lot of different things, kind of like the smoking thing, where the therapist would be like, okay, Mike, is this something you're willing to change? And he'd literally be like, no. This is not something I'm willing to change. She knew this, that I wasn't going to.
honest.
Yeah. And then the therapist was like, okay, well then Aurora, now the work becomes, how do we make this okay for you? And I'm like, why am I the one who has to just make things okay for me? And she's like, well, if you want to be with him and he's not willing to change it, then the only work we can do is make it okay for you. And it was just, I was between a rock and a hard place. I mean, I didn't have a choice other than if I wanted to be happy, I couldn't be with him.
Right.
You know.
Or just gaslight yourself. But that's a tale as old as time. That's what women have been asked to do for centuries, is just accept bad behavior from men. And that's why I just decided I no longer valued being cool or being chill, because all that is the patriarchy telling us that what they value is you letting them do what they want to do.
Yeah.
Even though the same rules don't apply to us, by the way.
Oh, not at all.
But I just decided, I was like, I'm not going to play into this, because I saw women, my parents' friends, and people in their 60s in our social circles, my friends' parents, where they didn't grow up with any sense of individuality, independence, because of what society placed on them. And you get to a certain point and you're 60, 70 years old, your husband leaves you, you've never worked your entire life, you've raised kids, you've devoted your life to your family. Guess what? There's not as much money as you thought there was, so there's no alimony to speak of.
Yeah.
And now you got to go back into the workforce at 60 after not having worked for 30 years. That's not a life I want, and that's not a life I think any woman should want. And I don't know. I thought the whole idea of just and that's how it starts. You know, it never starts off with being like, oh, you're 60 and divorced and he was an asshole this whole time and you just ignore it. It starts off with the little things.
Right.
Like, he doesn't like it when you tell him not to do this thing that is very bad for him, and you just keep ignoring it and you keep ignoring it, and over time it just compounds. And I think women have a lot more choices now these days, which really is great. But also, it's strange, feminism has done so much for us in terms of encouraging women to work and earning a living and everything, but then men, the ones that are still holding on to the patriarchy, they expect women to not only now be full-time stay-at-home mothers, but also be full-time breadwinners.
I know.
So I don't really understand that. It's like, what's your part of the partnership? I know so many women our age who their income is indispensable to the family and how the family runs and the bills and everything, but they are also more of a parent to the children than the father is.
Yeah.
And so if you want a stay-at-home wife, you really need to pull your end of the bargain.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how many men are willing to do that. Like the red pill guys, right? The trolls or whatever on social media are always like, what do you bring to the table? I'm like, honestly, if the family can run without you as a man, like if you leave town and your wife is totally fine to do her job, raise the kids, maybe with the help of a nanny that you've always had, then what the fuck are you doing?
I think that's kind of where I'm at right now with dating. In a lot of ways, there's not a whole lot of motivation because that's what I'm doing. I have 2 kids. I make the money, and I have an au pair who lives with me, which is amazing, because I can afford to do that because I make money, and I don't have. I mean, the only thing that I don't have is like a man that I hit 5 million times a night saying, "Shut up, stop snoring." Like that's it. Like, and I mean, like, I guess somebody to consistently have sex with, but like, I also I was saying this to my friend the other day. I'm like, it's so nice not to feel like I have to have sex with somebody all the time, which probably speaks to my last relationship that I just didn't want to have sex with him because emotionally we were not connected for all a million reasons. But like, I don't know. Part of me is like, do I really want to bring a relationship into my life where like now I feel like it's one extra person I owe things to? But I think that's my warped idea of relationship in a way.
I mean, look, it's tough because you're not freshly divorced, but you're somewhat recently divorced.
Yeah, like it's been a year, like a year legally.
Officially, right.
Yeah.
But I think that's the thing is I have girlfriends going through divorces right now, and mind you, in the same position as you. They were not married for very long before they realized that the person they thought they were hitching their wagon to was not the person that they wanted them to be. And so every woman I talk to who's going through a divorce says the exact same thing. They're like, my life is actually totally fine without a man in it.
Right.
I don't know if I need to invite that chaos into my life. And you don't need to. And only when you feel like that person is additive to your life and you are additive to theirs, does it make sense to commit to somebody. But I think almost in a way it's freeing for you.
It totally is. But then there, I do like the idea of being more in my feminine. Like, part of me really wants to be this trad wifey kind of person. Like, I want to make sourdough and just like putter around the house in like a flowy dress. But, you know, I think there's some of that in all of us, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't think society wants us to pick one thing, and it's hard to do that because sometimes I want to be a boss babe, sometimes I want to be a trad wife, like whatever. But
you can be both.
I can be both. It's hard without a man. It's hard it's hard to be both when I really do have to play both roles right now, you know? So I don't know. What advice would you give to me when looking for since clearly my picker is all off? And where did you meet your husband?
Bumble.
Okay, so you met him on a dating app, so it actually works.
It works, and it was a numbers game, and I dated a ton of people. I don't think people understand the sheer volume of men I went on first dates with and second dates and third dates. There were periods in my 20s for years where I was going on 3 first dates a week, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And it was all for one goal, to meet a husband.
Right.
And so it was a career for me almost. I said it was my second job. And when people were like, oh, I went on a bad date with this guy from Hinge, or I went on a bad date, you know, I've dated 2 or 3 guys this month. It hasn't been great.
Yeah.
I'm like, go on more.
You're not doing enough.
Yeah. And
Did you know right away with your husband?
I knew. I felt very comfortable with him.
Okay.
And I think that's my advice to anybody is that you first have to feel like they're home in a weird way.
Okay.
It almost felt like we had met before and it was very easy and I wasn't nervous. I had gone on so many dates with men where I was attracted to them when I first met them, but it was a little awkward at first and there was sort of just a little bit of ice to break. But I was really jaded because I had fallen in love at first sight with many men prior to that.
Yeah.
And I just felt like, let's see how this plays out, because there were a couple men in my past where they made me feel really comfortable on the first date, and we had great chemistry, and I preemptively declared to all my girlfriends I just met my husband, and of course they broke my heart.
I do that every week on my podcast. I'm like, I found the one, guys. And I would be like, maybe you shouldn't say that since like you're embarrassing yourself.
No, but it's great because you know what? It's part of the journey. Like, I thought I was going to get married to so many men. I mean, in college, I dated a guy who was Jewish, and I was going to convert for him. I was like, if that's important to you, I will convert for you. I will do whatever it takes. I thought it was going to be a Jewish. Yeah. I was like, I will mold myself into your life. Right. And I just found somebody that really wanted to build together. And we are weird in the same way. And we see our lives going in the same path. And that's really why I just feel like I met the right person. But you have to give it time. I think so many people, myself included, always wanted to be like, oh, is it the one? Is it not? And by the time I met Dave, I was so happy with my life. A little bit like where you are now. I was making really good money for the first time as a real estate agent, and my business was doing well, and I was living alone for the first time, and I was really doing my whole Sex and the City thing. Yeah. And I just felt like I don't need this. I would really love it, but I don't. I was 27, about to be 28, I think, when I met him. So it was a really nice time in my life where it was the first time in my life I had real disposable income, and that's really freeing because I started taking myself out to dinner alone.
You did? People keep telling me date yourself, and I'm like, I don't want to go out to dinner alone. I feel like, don't people bother you when you go out to eat alone?
No.
I don't know. I feel like people bother me.
Maybe
I just project that.
You can, I think it's like you can sort of not give off a fuck you vibe, but also don't sit at the bar alone. I would always sit at a table for two alone because the objective would not to be to meet somebody. The objective would be to say, I want to go to this restaurant because it's a nice restaurant and I enjoy good food and I can enjoy this alone. I don't need a witness to my joy. Yeah. So that was a really freeing practice for me. And by the time I met him, I was like, this would be really great and it's exciting. But if it doesn't happen, I will live. Whereas so many other times I thought, if this guy leaves me, my life will be over. And I said that. I said so many times, my life will be over. And it never was. I was 24 years old in the city. It's like ridiculous, right? Thinking that. But it really felt like my life was ending a lot of
and
these
that
times.
energy is palpable, and it always repels a man or anything, really. Like, if you feel like everything is relying on this one thing happening, it's the recipe for disaster.
Well, I was always waiting for a guy to save me. Yeah. And I don't think I ever wanted to admit that to myself in my 20s. But I came out of NYU, and I wanted to be an actress. And that's an insanely dumb career, to pursue if you want money. That's just, if you want to be financially stable, do not pursue a career in the arts. Yeah. And I wanted to do it because I knew I was never going to try it later on in life if I didn't do it now. And I had a very unstable financial picture in my 20s because of that. And I always thought, well, if I meet a guy that will take care of me.
Totally. And we're taught that, like, from being even I feel like my dad would say things like that, like, oh, you're gonna marry rich, or at least you have your looks going for you. Something like horrible that dads should never say to their kids. And I think he always wanted me to be successful on my own. My parents always gave me great education and great schooling, but I think that was their culture too. And back then,
they thought your husband was going to be your insurance policy,
right? And I was like, Dad, you're my insurance policy. Yes, I watched Dateline. You're better dead than alive. No,
that is so true. Oh my God, I watched so much Dateline also. Never get an insurance policy.
No, never.
Oh my God.
You're the murderer if you got an insurance policy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so do you feel, I know are your parents Chinese immigrants? Yes. Okay, so you're a second generation. You were born in the U.S.?
Technically, I think how it works is they're immigrants. I'm first generation.
Sorry, yes.
First generation.
Yes. Okay. Do you feel like culturally there's something to be said about you dating to find a husband, and do you feel like there was any cultural obstacles you and your husband had to overcome?
Oh my God. Culture and the way in which you were brought up, not just cross countries and everything, but just every family has their own culture.
Right.
Matters so much. And I never understood that until I got married, that you don't just marry the person, you marry the family and everything the family is about. But I think what happened was that I was born and raised here. So I was born in Michigan, raised in Pennsylvania. So I'm fucking American, right?
Yeah.
But I was raised with really Chinese parents who were very open-minded and liberal in how they raised me. They never forced me to do anything. They actually supported my career in the arts. They were very nervous about it, but they said, go do what you want to do because we came to this country and did what we did not want to do so that you could go pursue your dreams, right? Wonderful. I was like, I don't know if I would have said that if I were in your shoes to my only daughter.
Right.
But fine.
Were you an only child?
I am an only child. And so I am the eldest daughter and the only daughter. Yeah. And I never realized how Chinese I was in my culture because I had been born and raised in this country. I was like, I am very American. It's not that I feel any different, I think, to people when I talk to them, but how I look at family is very uniquely Chinese. Chinese families are very, very intergenerational. So to me, what was always important in the future was that my husband realized I'm never putting my parents in a nursing home, in a senior citizens home. I don't care that there's these luxury senior citizens home ever. It's like, that's just not what you do in Chinese culture. It's not to say
what anybody should do.
But it's very normal in America, and it's not a bad thing here. I'm not shaming that. It's just I don't want to do that. And so if it means that we have to get an ADU, accessory dwelling unit, onto our house, or we have to hire in-home care and I have to care for them, like that is a privilege, right? Because they cared for me. And so it's hard to find an American guy that's like,
Sure, your parents can move in.
Yeah, and they're so far from that. But I was like, one day in the future, if that happens, you need to be okay with that. Yeah. And Dave was like, totally, whatever. Aww. And it's so easy to, it's not easy to say that, but he really proved it because during the pandemic, we had been dating for about 1.5 years at that point, and we were both living in New York. And I knew it was going to be really bad because I'd been hearing all the stuff in China starting from January, while the U.S. was still sort of blissfully ignorant to the fact that this was definitely coming, that there was no way to prevent it from happening. And I said to him in February of that year, we need to go home and move in with my parents for 3 months in quarantine. And he was like, you are absolutely out of your mind. He's very in office. He's in office 5 days a week. He's like, I can't do that. My partners are going to be like, what the hell are you doing? I'm the youngest guy there. There's no way that's happening. I was like, it's happening. So I set up.
Is he a lawyer or?
No, he works in banking.
Okay.
So I set up a spare room in my parents' house. I bought a desk off of Wayfair that like my dad put together, and then 2 computer monitors and a desktop. And I did it in February, and he was like, this is such a waste of money. Like, why are you setting up a home office for me? And I was like, you're gonna need it, right? And I ordered a shit ton of toilet paper and paper towels.
Oh my God, you're the one who took all the toilet paper.
It was me. I'm still going through it. No, joking, but it actually took me 1 year to go through all the toilet paper.
Stop.
We had so many paper products.
Oh my gosh, you were the one. Remember people were like hating on like anybody who would buy more than like 4 rolls of toilet paper. They're like, save some for the rest of us.
It was dark times, right?
It really were.
So March 14th was when New York City shut down, and we left the city with a bunch of our stuff in garbage bags, and we went to my parents' house. And we lived.
Were you in Michigan or Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So we drove from New York to Pennsylvania, and we lived with them for 4 months full time, and it was great. No, everybody got along. It was no big deal. And he really got to know them in a way that I felt like would not have been possible had the pandemic not happened, because there is a cultural divide there. English is not their first language. Okay. So
what do you speak with your parents?
Mandarin.
Okay.
Some combination of Mandarin and English at this point. And they speak fluent English,
right,
but it's not their first language. There's still a cultural divide, and it would take more time, I think, to get to the same place that they are now than me with like maybe his parents.
Right.
And
you got to go move in with them for a few months.
I know, right? So and it was, everybody I say that to is like, oh my God, that's so crazy. Like, how did you survive? And I was like, it was actually great. And if I'd known that I was going to live and everybody in my life that I loved was going to live,
Yeah.
I actually would have enjoyed that time a lot more because you're never going to get that again as a 30-year-old living with your parents. I would have trad wifed it up more. I would have made more
sourdough
pizza and sourdough with my mom.
I
and
was
learned more from
pregnant during
recipes.
that time.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's so scary because you have to go to the doctor.
To the doctor a lot. Yeah. So and also it was just kind of like, I don't know, I hated being pregnant during that time because you already kind of feel like trapped in like
your body
and then I was like trapped in a house in my body, like there's all different levels of being trapped. Oh my God. But my sister actually stayed with her at the time boyfriend's parents for 3 months as well, and my other sister stayed with them too. So now both of my sisters are, well, obviously one of them is really close because they're her mother and father-in-law, but my other sister is also super close with them too because she lived with them. So weird. And then at that time also Sophie was like, so my sister's husband Christian has three brothers.
Oh wow, he's one of four
boys. Yeah, and they're all like elite athletes. And Sophie and Olivia were both with her during the pandemic at the parents' house, and all the boys were there too. And Sophie and one of the brothers were like getting a little canoodly, and which did not work out well. but it was, the whole thing was just bizarre.
It's almost like you can't help it at that time because it feels almost like college when you're all just sort of, I mean, this is it. Like this is the social circle, so it's like the last men on earth.
Yeah, it's like everybody looks a little cuter. I don't know. It's like I feel like during pandemic, like anything goes. You just kind of excuse whatever happened during that time.
Everybody does look more attractive because there is literally no one else. So if you want any sense of romance in your life, like you just go for it. I mean,
100%. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question for you. Like, where do you think you found the confidence to be like, oh, I'm not going to settle for just any relationship? Where do you think you found the confidence to choose yourself and what you really needed over just kind of being like, oh, I'm getting to my 30s, I better find somebody quick?
I think it was the thought of, is this the rest of my life? Because I dated a lot of men that were good men. I always like to say just because he's a good guy doesn't mean he's the right guy. I dated a lot of really good men in my 20s where I was the Chad. I screwed them over. But I dated them because...
The Chad screws over?
I was the one that was like the bad guy in the relationship.
Is that what Chad is the bad guy in the
Chad
relationship?
is the bad guy in the relationship. Sorry.
Got
it. My random terminology. But
you need a glossary.
I know, right? I just felt like with a lot of these guys that I was looking at the rest of my life and being like, is this it? And I didn't want to feel like that. And so I left, even though it was hard because I think I could have married a lot of those men. They were great people.
And it was a safer choice.
And they're safe, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But I just thought my life just feels so unexciting and just boring. And a lot of them, I think in a breakup, a lot of times maybe there is a good guy, maybe there's a bad guy, and a lot of times there's just a lot of both, right, on both parties. There were a lot of men that did not really approve of the life choices I was making with my career.
Oh,
and
really?
I think they could... Yeah, and I think a lot of the guys I dated were great men who thought that I would grow out of this.
Like influencering?
I wasn't even influencing at that time. I was literally just going on auditions and not booking roles and doing gig work.
So you weren't doing any real estate at that time?
I wasn't. And I think a lot of men thought that I would just grow out of my desire to be in media. And when it didn't really happen, I think the pressure started to, ramp up and be like, well, you'd be so good at sales. People would always say that. I don't know why. And I'm like, selling what? Like, they'd be like, I don't know. You'd be like great at like tech sales. Like, you could make a lot of money doing tech sales.
Yeah.
I'm like,
it's because you're smart and
I'm like,
you
because I
speak
can
eloquently. Yeah.
I was like, I can't think of anything I would rather
not
less.
do. I know.
Somebody said I should go into pharma sales, and I was like, oh, so I can go around to doctors' offices and
with equipment.
And some people love that, and I just thought, no, I just don't want to do this.
Yeah.
So I think the confidence honestly just came from feeling like I was not going to get what I wanted in life if I settled.
Yeah.
And I wasn't confident. And I think there's this idea that you have to be confident in all of your decisions. I wasn't. I just felt like I'm not happy right now. And I probably won't be happy after I make this decision either, but I'll be one step closer to being happier.
Okay.
And so I think you just have to have a really clear idea of what you want for your life and not be willing to settle.
Right.
And that's the only reason I have anything I have. I mean, I started influencing, blogging, whatever, when I was 30. And I started off with a WordPress.
And you're 32 now.
I'm 34.
Oh, okay.
So nothing happened for 2 years. Think about this. Getting on Instagram and posting photos and videos to nobody. For 2 years, I did that. And I'm sure everybody in my husband's life thought I was crazy because you're 30 years old. They're like, what the hell is your wife doing? You know, you're engaged. Like, and he has a very great career.
Yeah, like a normal job.
A normal job that makes sense to people. And all of his friends are married to women that have really great careers that have followed a traditional path. And here I am, like I wasn't successful in acting. And now I'm about to try to not be successful in influencing. And so it was just a whole pile of failures.
And your husband supported you through that?
He did. And he was like, I really believe you have the personality. You can do this.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't know what you're going to do, but I know you're going to do something.
You're going to do it. And so at that time, you weren't doing real estate yet either?
I quit. I had to quit my real estate job because we moved to Connecticut. Okay. And my license was only valid in New York City, and my business was really only in New York City. So I was unemployed. And the natural step would be, okay, go get your real estate license in Connecticut and start selling houses. And I was like, I really don't want to. Like, this was, the real estate job was really a means to an end for me. It was a great job in the city. I loved the company I worked for, but it wasn't my passion.
Right.
There's so many people, like you watch people on $1 million listings that are so passionate about real estate. I was like, I just need money to facilitate my acting career. And so I was like, well, I would really love to be an influencer. I don't know how, so I'll just start. And my millennial ass started a WordPress when everyone was on TikTok in 2020. And it didn't work for 2 years. And
2 years you tried the WordPress?
2 years I tried WordPress and Instagram.
Okay,
Photos, I tried to do that fashion thing, and it didn't work. It really did not work. And then one day I posted a video talking to camera on TikTok about dating, and it took off, and the rest was history. But I was.
Do you remember the script of the video?
100%.
Oh my God, say it.
I mean, I don't remember the whole thing, but the whole message was, I think the catch, the hook was, let's talk about how I stopped being the girl that guys wanted to date and ended up being the girl that guys wanted to marry.
Okay.
Something like that. I'm messing it up now. But the gist was, it was sort of like a fake out, is that stop worrying about being the girl that guys want to date or marry, and realize that you are the grand prize. That if the man does not make you feel like you're the grand prize, then you're not with the right man, and that your standards are not crazy. And it took off, and I was like, this is probably what I'm meant to be doing. But I was 32 when that happened. You think about how often society writes off women. It's like, oh, you're in your late 20s and you haven't figured out. You're 30, you haven't figured out 31. And so it was embarrassing. And it's not so much what people say to your face. It's what they don't say to your face, but the energy you get from people at parties.
I know.
And when they ask you, you know. I mean, everybody who does this knows. And that's why it's so refreshing to be in this business talking to other people and other creators, because we've all been there.
Yeah.
And we still get it. It's like, no matter how much that you and I are really making a living and we're supporting families with it, it's like you still get that weird moment of just
like, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm a digital entrepreneur creator.
Is that what you say? I still don't know what to say.
Content for life.
You know what I say? I say I'm a woman of the internet.
Yeah, I'm a woman of the internet. You're like, which type of internet?
I know. And then somebody said, that makes it sound like you're on OnlyFans. I was like,
or some kind of porn site.
I know.
Oh my God. That's so inspiring, though, because first of all, you really are amazing at speaking, but more so, it's like you say the thing that people like want to hear, but it's also very unique. Like, you're not just like, oh, choose you, date yourself instead. Like, it always has a very kind of like deep and almost spiritual like undertone.
I hope so.
Yeah, it's very deep. Like, I love that's how I found you, because I was like, oh my God, she's talking to me. It was something along the lines of like, you know, what you just said. I think it was that video that I saw actually, like, how not to be the girl that guys want to date, but how to be the girl that guys want to marry. And then, like, actually it's, be the person that you want to be. Yes. And then that the right person will automatically, like, fall into your lap.
Yes. And I think I talked to my husband and all of his friends, and my husband was 34 when he met me, so he dated a lot of women too. But I was like, were you brutalized by this dating process? Yeah. He's like, no. It just didn't work out with a lot of people. But men do not place their value as human beings on the women that want them. Most of them don't. Obviously, a lot of men want to be desired, and it's a human thing to want to feel like you're attractive and women are attracted to you and whatnot. But men are not taught that their value from a young age lies in just who wants them or who picks them. They're taught, like, go get it in your career, make a lot of money, like, be a boss, and then you can pick.
That's
right?
Such a good point. We really do, as women, like, I feel like rejection from a man does cut deeper for us.
100%. Every woman I know who did not meet their husband in college or high school and had to go through the dating process has been brutalized emotionally by the dating process because they internalize it. And we all do. And men just don't operate like that because they haven't been taught to feel like that.
Yeah.
And I think if we placed maybe more importance, and I think we're getting better at it as a society, I think if we place more importance on little girls pursuing their dreams outside of meeting Prince Charming, it would be so much better for women's psyche. And I say this a lot, but I think as millennials, Disney princesses really fucked us over.
100%.
Because we didn't have Moana.
No.
Are you kidding me?
No. We didn't have Inside Out. No. The, like, internal family systems.
We had Snow White, who had to literally wait to be kissed to not be dead. Okay?
And she was, like, also drugged and unconscious.
I know.
I feel like
exactly.
That's not it.
Ariel with the voice and everything. My favorite Disney princess growing up was Mulan. Obviously, there's identity politics happening there, but I always thought it was so badass that she was the person to not only save her father from having to go to war, but save her whole village. And only then, I mean, do you remember the ending scene? Shang comes in and he's like, hey, and she's like, what's up, And I just always thought that was so amazing, but we didn't have that growing up. And so I always wanted to be picked. I thought that would solve all of my problems, and it actually only added to it.
Right. Yeah. We all always want to be picked. And you want to be chosen by somebody who you look up to, somebody who's somebody,
You want to be picked by the man you can't have.
Yeah.
Because it feels like a victory.
Right.
And then you realize that the man you can't have is really messed up and you shouldn't have him.
Right.
Right. And so many women say that to me. They're like, why am I always falling for the guy that's unattainable or the one that doesn't want to be committed and everything? I'm like, it's because at some point in your life, I think, and I know where it comes from for me, you were taught that you have to struggle to have meaningful relationships. Yeah. And for me, some people say, oh, I had daddy issues or whatever. I had great parents growing up, and I still do. And they never taught me that. It was in school. I grew up the only Asian kid in a very, very white, homogenous town, and I always never fit in. I was bullied, and I had to try so hard to make friends. Mm-hmm. And I think I was socialized from such a young age to feel like I have to try to make people like me. Mm. And then when you get to be older and you don't have to do that anymore, you still internalize that, and then it still feels familiar. And I think familiarity leads us all down a very dark path because familiarity doesn't mean you should be doing it. It just means it feels familiar. So I was familiar trying and having to be really sweet and fit into people's lives. And on a date, I really knew how to present myself. And I knew how to make it a great date for the guy, even if I didn't like him. I was like, even if you're going to have a great time. You're going to have a great time. I am miserable. But, the guys that, and men do this a lot more than women, the guys that literally have no idea how to ask you a question or put the conversation back in your court. Yeah. And you just keep asking questions and responding. You're basically talking to yourself. Yeah. And then you leave and you're like gasping for air.
You're exhausted. Yeah.
And he's like, that was an amazing day. And he thought it was him. Yeah. And he's like, such a great time. Like, when are you free next? And I'm like,
Never. Like, you've sucked all the life out of me. I can't do this for the rest of my life. Like, I will be dead.
We do that because we want to be liked. even by the men who we don't like. And isn't that so wild?
True. That is so funny. I remember being rejected by a guy who I did not like. Actually, kind of recently this happened. I've been this happened twice in the last 6 months where I was dating somebody, like had gone out on like a few dates, and I was not enjoying it at all. It was very obvious. Like I cannot fake it. We were not having a good time together. I didn't want to hook up with him. I didn't want to, and then, you know, he kind of couldn't stand it anymore and was like, well, like, I don't really, it seems to me like there's something missing. I don't know, like, if you're just not feeling it, but I don't think we should see each other. And then I'm like, felt so rejected. And I'm like I just didn't feel like dumping him because I didn't want to hurt his feelings or reject him. So I just kept going on dates with somebody that like I didn't even want to spend time with.
Right, but it's that inner child, whatever, that wants to be loved so badly,
right,
even by the people that you do not love.
Right.
And I was doing that so much, and it's so exhausting. You just realize
so exhausting.
You'd rather just be alone.
100%. Do you think that there's like a date number? I heard you say before that time really matters because it gives somebody a chance to really learn about the other person in a million different situations. Like, do you think there's a number of dates you should wait before you kiss or sleep with somebody?
I don't think there's a hard and fast number, but I think for me, my rule was pretty early on that I was not going to sleep with somebody until they were exclusively my boyfriend.
Okay.
Not exclusive without labels. That's bullshit. Like,
what's exclusive without labels?
It's like this weird thing that guys would tell me, like, oh, I don't want to be boyfriend, girlfriend, but I'm willing to just date you and see how it goes. I'm like,
it's like you can think that, but no one else will think that.
Yeah, I'm like, that's not how it goes. That's basically you saying you don't want to commit. Like, dating is already a trial period for marriage, if that is your end goal, right? If a traditional monogamous relationship is your end goal, dating is the trial period.
Right.
Why is there now a trial period for the trial period? Like, how non-committal as a society can we get?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I made that a rule, and any guy who wasn't okay with that, they could leave. Yeah. And actually, a lot of men were very respectful about it. You'd be surprised if you just stand up for what you want and you're not a dick about it. Yeah. People respect that. They're like, okay, I said, look, if that doesn't work for you, I understand, but this does not work for me. I'm not going to get physical with you, physically intimate until, and we would make out and stuff, but like no sex until we're committed to each other. Right. And so I don't think there's a hard and fast rule, but I do think that you need to be wary of the man who's too hard, too fast, all in. Because I got burned so badly by this guy when I was in my mid-20s. And I met him and I talk about this character in my life a lot because it was so pivotal in my life. I'd never been bamboozled that badly. I'd been heartbroken so many times, but I met him, I think, the beginning of January, right after New Year's Eve. We went on a first date. It was an amazing date. We had so much chemistry, and he was 9 years older, and there was something very comforting about him because he was kind of like an old soul, and I've always been attracted to men who are a little bit like old men at heart, not necessarily in age, but just like don't have social media or are not into the party thing, like maybe don't have that many friends or whatever. So, and he also worked in media and entertainment, and he was very successful. And I would be lying if I said there was a part of me that said, hey, I can knock out my husband and my career in one go.
You're good for me. Yeah.
I know. And so it was very attractive to me at a time where I was very vulnerable. And he was the perfectly wrong person for me at the time because I kid you not, from the moment we met, that first date, he would text me morning until night. I don't know how he got any work done, and he had a very big job, so he just must have not done that job. Morning until night, every hour for 6 weeks. Right, good morning. How's your day going? Yeah. Like 10 o'clock, noon, I'm going out to lunch, 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, getting out of, like, okay, good night, right? Every day for 6 months.
That's how a lot of my relationships start.
And they feel so much more intense. Yes. And it feels like you've been dating them for so much longer, even though you haven't. And then he ghosted me on Valentine's Day. Until 11:45 p.m. He was like, sorry, crazy day. How are you? And I was like, do you think I'm fucking dumb? So I called him out. We went to dinner, and I was like, what's going on? And he said, I don't want to give you the wrong impression. Sorry, I shouldn't have, ghosted you on Valentine's Day, but I didn't want you to get the impression that we
were something.
Something. I was like, fuck have you been doing the last 6 weeks? And then he gave me the line, I'm willing to date you, but not commit to you. And I was devastated, but I said, no, I'm not willing to do that.
Yeah.
And I had never been as depressed because I did not see it coming. And I broke my rule for him. I slept with him before I got...
That's always how it works.
I was like, there's no way this guy is... And he was like a little dorky too. Like,
isn't that... But those are kind of the ones where you're like, okay, maybe I have the edge over them because they're a little dorky. And you want to feel like you have... At least in my... Like, I feel like I pick people that I think I'm a little... Like...
like you're the catch. You're the catch.
At least in some way. So I feel like I have an edge because it's safe. And
let me make it clear. I was not a better catch for him. He was just so kind. You know, he was so nice. But those are the men that, oddly enough, sometimes screw you over the most.
And I like what you said too about like the coming in really strong and the more intense it is in the beginning, or like right away, I feel like you almost get tricked into thinking you know them better than you do because it really hasn't been a long time and you haven't seen them in a variety of situations, but you feel close to them. So it's like a dangerous place to be because you're giving them more trust than they've earned.
100%. And you think you know them so much more, but you don't. And this guy was involved in somewhat of a public scandal many years after the fact I dated him. And I remember looking at that after it unfolded. I didn't hear about it at the time. And I just thought, thank fuck I did not end up with him.
Right?
I was like, that was God doing me a solid, being like, you thought you wanted this, but you were a moron. And I think that has been the saving grace in my life, is that I have been too stupid to know what I should want throughout my 20s. And fate, the universe, God, whatever deity you believe in, have always stepped in and said, you don't know this, but you should not be with this man. So we're going to remove him from your life. Whereas I don't think some women get so lucky. Like, they
don't. Or maybe they just are more stubborn to not looking at the signs. Like, you could have chased him. You could have kept,
I could have. And I always wondered what would have happened. And I think I would have just slowly ebbed away at my own self-confidence and my own just way of, and I just knew even if I'd gone back to him, it would never be the same.
Mm-hmm.
It would never be what I thought it was for that first 6 weeks when I was just so blissfully in love with this man that I thought was
so fun. It's such a dopamine high.
Oh my God. It's a drug. It's such a drug. And then you stop doing it and you crash. I mean, it's the wildest ride. But yeah, be careful of the guy who's too fast.
Be careful of the guy who's too fast and the guy who makes you break your own rules.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing worse than just feeling like you, not only has he hurt you, but you hurt you.
I know.
You know, that's the worst. Oh my God, I feel like I could talk to you forever, but we do have to wrap up. I guess let's leave on a positive note because this is what you are so great at. What is one thing you want to tell some girl out there or boy out there who's listening who hasn't found the one yet, but is hopeful? What advice do you have for them?
My advice for women especially is don't focus on meeting a man. Focus on making money because your money will free you. And if you put yourself towards your career and bettering yourself, I promise you the right man will come along. It's just you really have to put yourself in a position. I really think women at this stage, like, we cannot just want to be trad wives. It is too dangerous to just want to be trad wives. You do not want to be left high and dry in a marriage, in a relationship, because you put all your stock on another person. Put that in yourself, invest in yourself. And then also don't be afraid to go on a ton of shitty dates like I did. You know, people always expect it's like, oh, like it happens when you least expect it or whatever. Don't be a passive participant in your dating career. It's a career. I treated it as a second job because the most important decision you can make with your life other than your career is who you choose to spend it with because it'll affect your career. So don't be afraid to try really hard. We don't give enough credit to the people who are tryhards. We give too much credit to the people who look like things are easy when in reality all those people tried really hard to get where they were.
I love that. Oh my God. I have nothing to say. I'm just going to, I'm going to do all of that and you guys are going to see I'm going to check back in with you in like, I don't know, a few months maybe?
Yes.
It's not going to happen fast. I'm not going to let it happen fast. Oh my God. Thank you so much. You're so much fun to talk to.
Thank you
so
so
much. You were made for this.
My handle is maybe both across social media, and my podcast is Brutally Anna.
Brutally Anna. Oh my God. I can't wait to listen.
Thank you.